Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Irgin Shir Teremos is Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir. I'd like to thank the sponsor of tonight's shir, Be'elim Shem, Be'ili Nishmas, Haisha Shalamas Nomi, Basar Rav Gedalia Aryeh, Aleh Sholem, and Haisha Chava, Basar Aaron Yosef, Aleh Sholem. Tonight's shir is also learned Be'ili Nishmas, my grandmother, Isha Esther Bas, her Pinchas, Aleh Sholem, that says tonight, Chof of. Tonight's shir is B'Tzara Chaim. I'd like to remind the Olam that Irgun Shir Torah's annual dinner is coming up in just a couple of short weeks on August 18th on Yisroel Avenue K. It's a great opportunity to show you Akaras HaTov to Irgun Shir Torah and all the Rabbanim who shirim you've enjoyed throughout the year, throughout the summer, putting an ad in the journal in their honor, and having a chelik on the Abatas Torah of Irgun Shir Torah. Call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com for this great opportunity. Tonight we have the cover to have with us once again Rav Moshe Tuvia Lieff, Rav Agudas Bais Binyamin, to talk on menachem Yisroel, the hidden power within every Yid. It's my cover to call in Rav Lieff for tonight's drasha.
Shkerch Rav Bald, Rav Deutsch, Shusti Boston Rebbe Shlita, Achai V'Rei. What's your tafkin in life? How do you know if you're realizing your inner potential? Moshe, how do you know you realize your inner potential? There's a Yid, actually, two Yidden that are sitting here in this room that share a Rebbe with me. Ramotel Katz Rav Avner, his son Rav Avner Shlita, and the Bitchi Braun Shlita. The Rebbe that we share is Mo'anai Goyen Reb Chaim Stein Zechet Tzaddik V'Kodesh L'Vocha. Who is Reb Chaim Stein? As Oshivav tells. And the Satmar Rebbe said on him, he's an Ish Kodesh. Binyamin went to the Satmar Rebbe. The problem, his son had issues with his legs. The Satmar Rebbe looks at him, he says, "Kommst von Cleveland? Was kommst du zu mir, als du hast the Ish Kodesh Reb Chaim Stein?" So that's the Satmar Rebbe, Reb Yoelish. He said that unser Rebbe Reb Chaim was an Ish Kodesh. Reb Chaim had a very close friend. His name was Agudas Tzadik Moltche Zuckerman. Moltche Zuckerman Zatzal was the Rav of Givashol. And they had such a close relationship, when Moltche Zuckerman was nifta, Reb Chaim wanted to sit Shiva. So a brother of a cousin of mine asked him, what's the lumdus? What's the lumdus of the relationship that they're so on the same page that Reb Chaim wanted to sit Shiva for a Moltche Zuckerman? So Moltche Zuckerman told him like this. Before the war, Reb Chaim Stein was a Magid Shirin Tells. As a Bocha, he was a Magid Shirin Tells. During the war, he led 15 Tells of Talmidim to Siberia, and he was a lumberjack. He felled huge trees. And after the war, he made his way back to Tells, ultimately becoming the Rosh Hashiva. So the Moltche Zuckerman, before the war, I was very close to the Chofetz Chaim, Talmud and the Chofetz Chaim. During the war, my job was to bury verbrannte Yidden in the Kovna ghetto. He personally buried hundreds and hundreds of Jews that the Nazis Yimach Shemam burned. And after the war, he became the Rav of Givashol. So people asked Reb Chaim, said Rav Moltche, and I, what did Hitler Yimach Shemoy V'Zachoi take away from you? Some people say 3 years, 6 months, 5 years. What did he take away from you? Reb Chaim and I hold that Hitler took nothing away from us, not even a day. Because before the war, the Binyamin wanted Chaim Stein to be a Maggid in Telz. During the war, to be a lumberjack in Siberia. After the war, to become the Rosh Yeshiva of Telz. Before the war, the Rebbein Shalom wanted me to be a close Talmud of the Chafetz Chaim. During the war, he tasked me with burying for Bente Yidden. And after the war, becoming the Rav of Givat Shol in Yerushalayim. If you ask any given person at any moment in his life, what's your tafkid? That's your tafkid. We're living in a world that's unfulfilled. I know attorneys that become accountants. My Shver Zatzal, by Dardek, said it's not a meshugana welt, it's a beautiful welt with meshugana people. Aman vivel nafroi, it's normal. Whatever you're doing, you're a Rebbe in the first grade, you're a Rav, you're a Rosh Yeshiva, you're a Maggid Shir, you're a businessman, you're an attorney, you're a plumber. That's your Avodas Hashem. So to find the inner greatness in every Yid is to find the inner greatness in yourself. My uncle Agoy Rav Moshe Rattenberg Zatzal, Rosh Yeshiva of Ger, Talmud of Yachal, Chach Lublin, Talmud Meir Shapiro, he used to always give a yeshiva bracha or a ben Torah or a mitzvah a bracha. Zos haben nachas von sich allein. It's nice to have nachas from your parents and your grandparents and the whole world, but live a life where you have nachas from yourself. So first and foremost, everyone has to understand that everyone in this room, and I ask a favor, those that are sitting in the back, shtupnish, we have plenty of room in the front. We'll fill up the area. It could be by the doors. It's a school for a lot of things, that statement. Al Kapanim, be a tzefrene mensch. Realize the Rebbein Shem gave you a mission. Talked about the Telzer Rosh Yeshivas. So Morener Ramotel Katz Zatzal, Morener Bel Yemei Bloch Zatzal were meeting in New York with some Telzer Talmidim about renewing, transplanting tells of Litta with 400 Bachram to the shores of North America. Somebody told me they once came on into Ramotel Katz in the morning and he was crying. Shiva, why are you crying? Because every morning he thinks of the 10 children that he had in Litta killed by the Nazis, and he couldn't come up with the face of his daughter. So daughter, he couldn't remember how she looked. He was crying. So this Yid, who lost his whole mishpacha and Baruch Hashem, married Manis Mandel's sister, and has tremendous Talmidei Chachamim, his children, Chassan ben Asiyah, you would think he's a lost man. Rebbe Yemei, a lost man. So somebody said to them, Rebbe Yemei, you're a polit, you're a refugee, Ud Mutzal Meyesh. What are these chaloimis to start tells a yeshiva? Tells yeshiva in its heyday under the guidance of Rav Moshe Tuvia, who was an unbelievable mechanech, had 400 Talmidim. Ubesaycham, der heintige Munkatsche Rebbe soll sein gesund, der Spinke Rebbe soll sein gesund, Hagoyim Rebbe Feinstein Shlita, that's where Rav Moshe sent his son to learn. Tells the yeshiva was legendary. Started with 5 Bachrim. So they told him, tells the yeshivas, you're platim, you're refugees, be happy you're alive. So Rebbe Yemei brought down the Novi that we read on Mocha Chodesh. They devised a scheme, Yehonasan and David. In Machetz, if the arrow is beyond you, Leich ki shilach Hashem, go because Hashem has sent you, you're in mortal danger. At the Beli Meir gefragt, Leich ki shilach Hashem, run for your life. There's no running for your life. Said Rebbe Meir, from Motel and I escaped Nazi Europe, is to transplant Torah here in America. We're not refugees. We have a mishlachas. Leich ki shilach Hashem. From Telz to New York, from New York to Cleveland. I spoke, Sean Bocher of Greenberg, was machte. I spoke to 500 people gathered under the aegis of unbelievable project, wonderful project that Mrs. Lichtenstein of Hamodia started, Project Witness. And these 500 people were children of survivors. Give them chizuk, the next generation. And I told them this word. I said, your parents are not survivors. There's a mishlachas. They rebuilt Torah in America. Hasidus, Torah, mikvois, yeshivas, chadorim, day schools all across the country. Where did Satmar come from? Where did Vishnitz come from? Where did the Mir come from? Where did Torah Das come from? Those Rosh Yeshiva, by my father's Levi that was in the Mir Yeshiva elder was the biggest hesped that they brought the Or Maspid in the Mir. Shul Birma, my Rebbe, Zatzal got up and he said, Avana Rosh Yeshiva is a Gebayt Torah in America. Abon Rabbanim V'Rav Lieff, where would the Talmidim come from? Did anybody think about that? The 30s, the 40s? We didn't just find religion. There were Yidden. There were Bachim that staff tells the Yeshiva, and Torah V'das, and Chaim Bolin, and the Mir. And those parents and the Rabbanim held strong to keep the Melech. We think like Yiddishkeit started after 45 in America. And it was just as dangerous in the 30s and the 40s as it was during the war and afterwards, the spiritual annihilation. Al Kopanim, you have to first figure out who you are. And once you know who you are, then you can start realizing your mission. The Ramah Paskins Halacha that you cannot give a Yiddish child a meinekes nochrias. Nochriya. She only has to nurse by a Jewish nursemaid. Can't allow a Jewish child to nurse from a non-Jewish source. And the Goyen brings down the Makar from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu would not nurse from a non-Jewish source. Moshe Rabbeinu. For Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky, Moshe Rabbeinu was pel dabel by kaspaklai amira. Your kid can't nurse from a non-Jewish source because of Moshe Rabbeinu. It complicates the issue. Zok Rabbeinu, Mereno Rabbi Yankov, Vaitztachais, you have to raise your child keilu he could be Moshe Rabbeinu. That he can talk to Rabbeinu Shloim per dabel by. Darf hieten sein Meul to make sure it doesn't have a non-Jewish source. You think that the internet is so dangerous because of the visions that you see, the words that are spoken. The Chazon Ish says that a person with a withering look, a schlechter cook, can destroy someone else's life, can bring down the Malachei Chavola. What kind of cook do you have to have? A good cook. We're good, and we have to cause that goodness to spread to others. Says Reb Chatzkel Avramsky Zatzal, who I was zeicher to know. I learned in his house. When I was a bach in Kol Torah, my chavrus and I, Rabbi Yisroel Darzi, learned in his house. And he would ask us kashas on Reb Shlomo Zalman Shir. We quickly figured out that these were rhetorical questions. That he wasn't looking for a 16-year-old's answer, he was looking to explain to us. He said like this, what does that mean? You get your smicha, you knock on your neighbor's door, you say, I heard you were fighting, I'm a Talmud Chacham, Amar b'sholem ba'olam, I'm an official Talmud Chacham, I can bring peace to the world. Is that what it means? If you have Yeri Yad and Yadim from Shmuel Birnbaum, you can go to the whole world and solve everybody's problems. Say, Talmidei Chacham, Ma'am Shalom Ba'olam. Sagt Reb Chatzkel, why are there kpedis in the world? Because people are unfulfilled. They haven't realized their mission statement. They're unhappy. All the Gashmis in the world, he writes, $1 billion will not make them happy. But a Talmud Chochem with his Blat Gemara is so wealthy, Bal Yeshua, that it spills over to his wife, to his children, to his neighbors, to his friends, to his community, to ganz Welt. That's Ma'am Sholem Bailam. You hear when you realize what you are, what you can do to others? The Goyen says the consummate mechanech is compared to a large kais surrounded by smaller kaisais. And the overflow fills the smaller kaisais. As a platz chibbe teure from the Rebbe that fills the smaller kaisais. Ki yadua, we've spoken about the Gemara in Tainis, Rav Bais, and Aleph. Rav Broika was Beshuka de Be Lefes in the marketplace of Lefes. And he had Gil Eliyahu, Vais Techais, he learned with Eliyahu Hanavi Chavrus every day. And one day he has a striking question. Who in this marketplace is a Ben Olam Haba? Not destined for Olam Haba. Obevel lept mit Olam Haba here and now. Who's living now with Olam Haba? So he explains to him with great detail that Yid, he goes into the prison, and he has a whole patent to save the Neshei Yisroel from being violated by the Goyim in prison. And then he says, Vahani, and these two. And he disappears, you figure it out for yourself. So he walks over to these two fellas and they say, Ma'avid Teichel, what's your job? You're like a billionaire. You own the Chicago and New York skyline. You give $100 million to stock every year. Maybe you started a Chug Shmir Saloshin in your neighborhood. Maybe you shush people from not talking during Chazar Sashatz. Like, what exactly do you do to be a Ben Olam Haba? Batchinan Anon. We're comedians. We make good jokes. Rabbis know how to make good jokes. You could be a Rav and have a sense of humor, or so I'm told. But when we see people are at CV, depressed, we cheer them up. Shalom Bayis problems, we cheer them up. But cheer them up doesn't just say, oh, look at the beautiful world, it's such a nice sky, purple mountain majesties. Smeichem, we're happy. Umesamchem b'yadam, says Rashi. So obviously, like I talked about the Goyin, if you want to cheer somebody up, you better be happy yourself. The saddest case is the clown crying on the inside, trying to cheer people up. So firstly, you want to be a Ben Olam Haba, you have to be happy. And after you're happy, you can make other people happy. Thank you so much. We're doing this already for 21 years, people. Amen. If you really want to hear the best amens in the world, come to Agudas Bais Binyamin on any average day and listen to the amens of Tzvi Halevi.
Thank you, Baba.
You're welcome, Tzvi. Oh, shkoyach. I'd Coke too, wow. But we only have one shtickle, so we'll have to put this one down. Oh, there's another one? Unbelievable what's going on over here. The drinks are flying from all sides. Kuponim, I just see, you know I love you.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as you know that. The kids are, smeichem u'mesamchem b'nei adam. You got to make people happy. How do you do that when you're happy? But the kasha, Reb Shmuel, my classmate from Chaim Berlin, and now he's in my shul. What does it mean, smeichem u'mesamchem b'nei adam? Of course, smeichem u'mesamchem. He has a pet comedy club. He gets fired out of the laugh. Versteht sich smeichem u'mesamchem b'nei adam. Smeichem u'mesamchem. Who's he going to make laugh? The parakeets? Zog Tagoyin. Rav Moshe Tuvia from Toronto, my close friend, that when a person is depressed as nishkin mensch, you're turning him into a bench. Smeichem u'mesamchem b'nei adam. You give a smile to someone else, Shalom Abrachat Tzadik, how are you? Nice to see you. Ain't it from the Chosh V'Yidin and Flatbush? I'm not saying his name, he doesn't like to be noticed, acknowledged. But make sure you all buy life insurance. If you make a chasna, the kid should have life insurance. Am I right? Am I saying something wrong? 100% right?
Rav Moshe said it, not me.
Okay, so he's just saying the name of Rav Moshe, I'm saying his name. Akopanim, Smeichum Masamchim B'Yadam, Zok Rav Kana, because Pasha Geret, when you're depressed, you're not a mensch. You're turning him into a mensch. Zok Damar Shoah. When a person's arm hurts, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kloini Roishim, my head hurts. Kloini Yodi, my arm hurts. Zok Damar Shoah, that when a Yid is depressed, the Rebbeinu Shalom is depressed. And when you cheer up another Yid, you're cheering up Kav Yochel Hashem. Smeichum Samchim B'nei Adam, that is a Ben Olam Haba. It doesn't mean when you won the lottery, you're fagrammed, you have a sore throat, you have a strep throat, you have a stomach ache, you have things on your head, you got a parking ticket, you went through a red light, you got caught. And Smeichum Samchim B'nei Adam. That's a Ben Olam Haba. You want to find your inner self? Sameach B'chelka, it doesn't mean satisfied with his lot, it doesn't do it justice. He celebrates his lot. If wanted me to have something else, I would have had it. He's giving me everything I need. And Memela, since I'm besimcha, smechem u'mesamchem b'nei adam. Nifla nevel, the potential that we have is limitless. And every time we smile at someone and say good morning, if we got that kasha Tisha B'Av. Shalom, how are you? Nice to see you. You, nice to see you. Kasha Tisha B'Av. Versteh nicht. Moshe, I don't know if you ever thought of this kasha. Moshe, the Hoib Gabbai from Shem Shabbos. What's the kasha? We have a problem. Yeah. Remember, guys, I told you if the cell phone's going to go off, it has to be a zippy tone. You know what I'm saying? Like Beethoven's Ninth, Pakel Bell, something geschmack. Nothing wrong. The first time is nothing. Second time is nothing. The third time maybe, but nothing wrong so far. Akopanim. What were you talking about? Before the cell phone went off. Oh, Tisha B'Av. So how do we get into this mess? How do we get into the mess? We didn't treat each other nice. We didn't talk to each other. We had Sanat Chinam. So on Tisha B'Av, we should be giving everyone big, slobbering Litvish kisses. What do? We ignore each other. Oh, that's good. Someone says good morning, you have to be like, you're hoping, you're davening. Somebody says good morning. Told us good morning. How do you say Shalom Aleichem? You're not tell an oval Shalom Aleichem. Unless maybe you meant to go into Rishonim, but it's not really a Bechas Shalom. That's what you do on Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, you should grab and hug everybody. What are you ignoring everybody? Maybe he doesn't exist. You don't see him for 25 hours. Bas is mit Torah. Bas is mit Torah. There's no chashivas of Torah. So what do? We don't learn Torah for 25 hours. What? Forget about the kinnis. Just learn the ganze Tag. What's the rationale? Problem with interpersonal relationships. I just heard a person say they do it all the time. Maybe in your block, not on my block. My block, people say hello to each other. Hello to you. I don't know who you are, but welcome. Al Kopanim. I don't know. I don't want to say anything negative about Flatbush. Flatbush is a great place. Minneapolis is a great place. Muncie is a great place. Milwaukee is a great place. Yerushalayim, Elat, Kiryat Sefer. Most people that I know walk in the street and say good morning. So I apologize if they haven't been nice to you. And I'll make sure they say good morning. Everybody say good evening to the gentleman. But he says this is the way it is all the time. In Bar Park Moshe, good morning. Shalom Aleichem, kommt daran in Shem Shabbos, you feel like you're a member of the club. Okay. Uncle Panim. So does it make sense that we don't talk to each other? Where's the rationale? Bodod yeshev chutz lamachane. A person who's a menace to society has to sit outside of the camp for 7 days, a mitzaycha muchlet. And he has to have his head and his face cowled up to his nose. And when a person approaches, he has to say, Tomei, 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 Tomei Yikra. He screams out, stay away from me. I'm a home wrecker. I destroy relationships. Okay, two on this side, one on that side. I destroy relationships between Rabbanim and Talmidim, between Rosh Yeshivas and Talmidim, between fathers and mothers and children. I'm destructive. I'm a menace to society. Tomei, Tomei Yikra, stay away from me. So what do you think happens after 7 days? After 7 days of complete introspection, he runs back, he speaks Lashon Hara. He taka gribs the first year that he can, and he says nice things. But don't lishkin Torah for 25 hours, chat menai Gemara. The aside is, my friend Rabbi Reisman said, there's a bug in the system, you have to shut down the virus. Pasha, go without it a little bit and see what it means. So the aside is, obviously, that when we're in Avelis, we can't talk to each other. Steht da viele Mishnichlas of Menachem besimcha. There's a machlokes, is it the whole month of Av? Is it until Tu B'Av? But even on Tisha B'Av, there's an Indian of Menachem besimcha. But Mamuzayim besimcha. You can't have a Yid who's existing as a Yid on Kin Simcha. So when a person realizes the potential that they have to push it, bring a person back to life. B'shvili nevrei olam. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, the Mishnah Lamed Zayin, Keitzim Ma'aimim, how do you terrify someone who's about to commit perjury? So we tell him, Adam Nivra Yechidi, and Kol HaMakayim Nefesh Achas Mi Yisroel Kilo Kiyim Olam Molei, Kol HaMa'abed Nefesh Achas Mi Yisroel Kilo Ibed Olam Molei. If you kill this person for false perjury, you're killing an entire world. But that's not enough. Rashi Zokt, as Reb Chaim Shmulevitz elucidates, that we finally tell him, you got to say every day, B'shvili Nivrei Olam, you're that world. And if a person realizes that he's an entire world, he won't do an Aveire. He won't succumb to the Aveire. There used to be a sprach that was used when I was a kid. I'm not that old. Se passt nicht. Remember such a sprach? Se passt nicht. Das ist mamish Rabbi Isaac Shell. Steht, wenn ich dashti besoich b'nei Yisroel, loi mitoich prishus, ela mitoich hashivus. Not because you read the Pelayoyitz, and if you look at the wrong thing, they'll hang you up by your eyeballs and Gehenim, or you talk Lashon Hara through your tongue. It's nicht. It's beneath your dignity. Everybody has a beneath their dignity. And once you have the dignity of B'shvili Nivrei Olam, even a person is about to kill someone through perjury will hold back. But versteht was is. Rabbi Yisroel Salanta used to wake up his children, he used to say, Prince, your world is awaiting your rule. How do we wake up the kids? Get up, you're going to miss the bus, you're going to be a bum, you're going to sleep in late, you're not going to make the test. There's like a transition from 1/60th of Misa to life. You got to control the transitions. A person comes home from a busy day at work, and he knocks on the door, walks in the house with a smile. Don't bring the load into your house. Rav Pam Zatzal, Rav Pam, every year, he'd give a chumash to the Bachram, and when he came to the Parsha of Shidduchim, he says, not everything at work do you have to tell your wife. Could you imagine that? You come in and you smile. You had a rough day at the office. Just because you had a bad year, why should she suffer? Fiddle on the roof. Pshat is that transition. And she who's expecting you eagerly. Rebbetzin Esther Hoberman was a machaneches par excellence. Hagoyin Reb Zev Hoberman's Rebbetzin. She was out of a seminary. She influenced thousands of girls. You know what happened when her husband would come home and she's on the phone? I'm sorry, I have to hang up, Rabbi, but Hoberman just walked in the door. Rabbi Hoberman just walked in the door. That sounds like a fantasy, right? Your Rebbetzins on the phone, balabutching. Oh, my husband just walked in, I have to hang up. I gotta tie all things up within a half an hour because he just got home. And it goes the same way. There was a balabus in Bnei Brak. that they had a phone in the house. And every month the Donnerstag is busy at the table with the phone, with the business. So one time they say there's a phone call from you. And it says 11-year-old kid on the phone. He went to the next door neighbor and he called his father. He says, Tati, the only way I can get hold of you is by calling you on the phone because that's the only people you talk to while you're eating the dinner. That's all part of transitions. You treat him like a king, he'll be a king. I want to tell you a chiddush. There was a song many years ago that became popular. I'm not going to sing it now because that's irreverent. Anachnu dor mitzuyan. Anachnu dor mitzuyan. Let me explain something to you. I should sing it, you don't know it? Because in Ingaret, ich gesingt in Ingaret. Anachnu dor mitzuyan. You feel better now? You got it? I'll sing it to you outside. Then it goes, upa, upa. Okay, fine. We're done. Irreverency is done. It's my friend. I have to listen to my friend. He needs a good shidduch also, by the way. I'll call upon him. So, kol hagodol mechaveiro yitzah gadol amenu. You know, the Yetzer Hara has to grow commensurate with you. Or else it's not bechira chavshes. It's not freedom of choice. If you're left with the Yetzer Hara, you had a nursery school, what's for Yetzer Hara? You're going to borrow a kid's marker without letting him know and put it back? The bigger you are, the bigger is the Yetzer Hara. So it's constantly a challenge. Chafetz Chaim Zatzal said people think I don't have an Yetzer Hara. I have a huge Yetzer Hara for everything. So let me ask you a question. Talking about the inner greatness of every Yid. There hasn't been a door l'chayra since Brias Olam that has the taivus and the instant gratification of our door. They never dreamt of such Yetzer Haras. So you know what that means? The average kid is a godel. You do the math. If they have so many Yetzer Haras, it means ein großer Menschen. And we get upset at them. Their button's not buttoned, they're not wearing the hat the whole time. Or other flagrant violations, they're wearing like cool socks. It's a chutzpah. I have a bochet Aguda. You know, I have some fatzaitische mishpachas in the Aguda. That when they come in for davening, they say Shalom Aleichem to the Rav. Good Shabbos. When I'm all in the Heim. So many people, they come in by Pesukah Zimra, they come over, middle of davening, give me Shalom. There's a family, sits in front of me. They had a couple of boys, Baruch Hashem married, they're making a bris of an anicle. Did the same thing. So one boy got killed when he was in 5th grade. He was wearing azalach funky socks. I'm not looking at your feet right now, but azalach lebedika socks. And mamish and this and that. And the kid was very insulted. Now I'm not starting with the school. They zichat cheshbonis for it. From my perspective, my Weltanschauung as being the Rav, he needed a little chizuk. So he used to come over to me for 3 years. Until he went to base management, he came over to me. So he would pull up his pants leg. And if I saw azalach neon socks, I gave him a thumb up. And if I saw black or blue socks, like that. That's it. The ganze Welt licked in the socks. I want to say something that sounds like kfirah. When I was a Bach in Chaim Berlin, the best base medrash Bachim wore blue and green shirts. And the Mir Yeshiva. And Mary Rabbi multiple gifters, that's I have a picture of him with a very cool shirt with stripes. It wasn't white. So that's it. It's all over. You don't have the penguin look. Doesn't work. There's a tchina and bakoshe that a Mekubal made up 500 years ago is based on stanzas of Kabbalah. It was the secret purview of the Noshim Tzidkaniyos, and the men never heard about it, as I've been in Brooklyn. We never heard about it. Until a few years ago, they made a song out of it. In it, they daven me'irim es ha'olam b'Torah u'b'mitzvos u'v'chol meleches avodas haboreh. So that means the Nashim Tzidkanias, when they shed copious tears, they daven for the children of Me'ir Mesa'olam B'Torah. So the Achosh of a Yid, his name is Rav Moshe Frank. He's a Breslover. Used to be a Magid Sheis, a big lamda in the yeshiva. And so in Steingerach, the Machla, Dor, in Eretz Yisroel, of kids going off to Derech, OTD. So he dedicates himself to Mechazik youngsters. Now, I was Zeicher to speak, and in a time event where they finished Shas in London and in America, Rav Frank once spoke at an event, and he said, we're learning Shas to create new neshamas for mishpachas nishtaygerach that don't have children. But what about the neshamas that we lost? What about the children who are not keeping Shabbos anymore? See, he quoted this tchina, and he said, this Paitan saw 500 years ago, Baruch Kodshay, that not every kid is going to be matzliach with the Blat Gemara. Avada me'ir mesar frek the mutter, Teire, 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 noch Teire. What's going on? Me'ir mesar b'Teire. What is this Maisim Tovim? Where's a right to Bindley? He works for Chaverim, he changes the tire. It is Teire, 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 noch Teire. But he saw Baruch Kodshay Tafshin Pei Aleph, 2021, that the mothers are going to cry with Tchinas and Bakoshes Hashem. Please, be mezaka me with Reb Kiva Eger, with the Satmar Rebbe, with Rav Moshe Feinstein, with the Rambam. Umir Masar B'Torah. What happens if it doesn't happen? What happens if in 11th grade, and the Gemara sounds like Mandarin Chinese? He has no idea. Fang Gong Gai, he has no idea what the Gemara means. So that's it. Becomes a pushtak, becomes a bum. The mothers in Klal Yisrael, probably millions of mothers, continue to daven. And if it's not in Torah, Masim Tovim could light up the night the same way. And if you don't have Masim Tovim, what's happened to us? Avodah Torah is the primacy of life, but you can light up the world with Masim Tovim too. You know who understood this? The Masmen Ador, Mari V'Rabbi, my father, Reb Shmuel Birnbaum Zatzal. Yankov Avinu hears Oid Yosef Chai. He declares, I got to see him before I die. For Reb Shmuel, of course, once you die, you can't see him. So he answered based on what Rabbi Chonan Zatzal Hashem Kem Domei told them in Baranovich. Gei Zed Chofetz Chaim, go run to ride in the city of Chofetz Chaim, because in this world you could see him. But La'asid Lavai, where they have the harach of who the Chofetz Chaim is, you won't be allowed in his mechitzas. Dr. Shmuel, the Masmen Adar said this. You should know that I wrote this from Nissen Wolpin Zatzal. He asked me to write this article in the Jewish Observer about my Rebbe. Remember the Jewish Observer? Used to be a magazine called Jewish Observer. So Bekitzer, he couldn't believe this was what Reb Shmuel said. He called me up to make sure it's what Reb Shmuel said. Reb Shmuel's nifta. I told him, yeah. I did such a great job in this article that I closed the Jewish Observer. That was the last issue they ever published. I'm just telling you the facts. I wrote an article. They didn't have another issue. So Mustama, I closed it. Zogt Reb Shmuel, the Masmen Hadar. Avada. Yankov Avinu Ishtam Yosef Eholim. But Yosef is called Yosef HaTzadik. He was Oimid ben Nisayin, the most difficult Nisayin according to the Medrash. The Nisayin of Eshes Pativa was more difficult than all the Nisayinis of Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak and Yankov combined. Another Medrash says for 2 years, when he's in jail, she shows up in a new outfit, he took it out of here. And you know what Rod Moshe Tuvia means? Pashtas, it means he saw Yankov Avinu and he couldn't do an Avera with the visage of Yankov Avinu. That's what the Slonimus says. Slonimus says, Vayimoin, with the Shalsheles, comes from Vayimoin Lisnachem. Yaakov refused to give up on Yosef, and Yosef didn't give up on himself. He held the Maaseh from the Slonimus. The Slonimus says, Vayimoin Lisnachem. The Mustikne, I would say, according to the Slonim, is not just learning a Blat Gemara. It's sitting and saying Tillim and saying Yosef is alive and I'm not giving up on my kid. 22 years, I don't give up on my kid. And that's the Mustikne that Yosef saw. The father never gave up on him. I had a relative of mine, Shtickle Lebedik. Started going bowling and movies and Meidla, whatever. So I went to him, how come you never went off the derech? How come you never really did things bad? He said, because I used to stay out till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and my father would stay awake by the Gemara waiting for me. And the minute I walked in the door, he said, you're okay? I said, yeah, he'd go up to his room. Sometimes he fell asleep by the Gemara. Father doesn't give up on the kid doesn't give up on himself. Zegt Reb Shmuel, Yaakov Avinu says, Avad, I sit and learn. But Yosef is called Yosef HaTzadik. I better go see him in this world, because who knows if in Yenevelt, Yosef HaTzadik, I'll be allowed in his environs. The Rebbe has gesagt. Do we know what it is for a kid to be Omer ben Isaiah? Do we realize we're raising royalty? And the challenges and the turmoil that our kids have today is the Chayach. I heard Beferish from Matisyahu Solomon, I go to Tzadik the Mashgiach, that if he grew up with the age of computers, he doesn't know if he'd be Shem Shabbos today. And not the Maisa. That's the Mashgiach Shlita. So we take it for granted. Azai, kid does this, a kid does that. Yeah, it's good. No! He's a God'll be Yisroel. So, Grada, I once had high school, 12th graders, about 20 kids. They are Levitic Chevra. So they say, we have a shver kasha for the Rav. If we're such gedolim, then how come people go to Reb Chaim for a bracha and they don't come to us for a bracha? Not the Maisa. It's a good kasha. If I just got finished saying to the best door, so if I was for mentioned Reb Chaim. So I told him that, steht doch, Jelech etzel Chochem v'yevakish yispal. Chochem is Tlusi knows how to daven and what to daven for, how to direct his tefillas. You boys don't have that yet. Ask him. I'm thinking about it. Tzaddik now. I was like pshat na Gemara. The Gemara sagt, Ha'oimer selazu l'tzedakah kedei sheyichye b'nei arei tzaddik gomer. Why is he a tzaddik gomer? I want to give $100. My kid should live. What's the tzitkis though? So I fixated on the word ha'oimer. Could you imagine when a Meshulach comes to your door and you tell him, "Oh, Rebbe, I'm so excited you're here. We need schusim, we need schuya. Somebody's ill in the family, and I will give you $1,000, and you could save this person's life." Und sie nicht emes. You want the person to think he's doing you the favor. Ha'oimer selazu l'tzedakah. Kedei shechav his kid's okay, but he doesn't want the fellow to feel that he's doing him a favor. He's doing me a favor. Ha'oimer selazu l'tzedakah. Imagine a yid. A Mensch kommt da rein und man sagt ihm, Rabbi said, there's so much you can teach your kids. There's so much that we can teach from ourselves. We have to believe in it. Find the resources in yourself. Hashemer Shabbos, Habeinim Abbas, Lokel Yerotz, Ukimencha Machras. Beautiful, nice rhyme. Bas, Vas, Chas, Las, Mas. It's great. It's the Atifa de Elda. The Mittel Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zatzal, had a chussid. I guess in Lubavitcher don't call it chussid. Had a chussid. Was a big gvir. And this was his anhogya. When a person would knock at the door, he'd give him a ruble, and then he'd take him a malteif into the wine cell, give him 500 rubles. Rebbe heard about it. Big mistake. Because your kids see you give a ruble. Have nicht kein Anivus mit den Kindern. Let the kids see you giving $500. Aber das ist der Pshat in der Zemmel. Hashem Shabbos, Beinu Abbas, you want to be Shem Shabbos, Beinu Bas, Lakeli Ha'otzu, pleasing to Hashem. So the avodah has to be Kimincha Al-Machavas, Ki Yedua Al the Kotshim Yidden, Menachas Yidden. There are 4 types of menachas. Each have the exact same ingredients, but the configuration of the pan is different. Macheshes is a deep pan. Machavas is a flat pan. Hashem Shabbos Habein Abbas Lakel Yerotzu. Your avodah has to be Kimincha Al-Machavas, has to be transparent. They have to see Geshmakait in Shabbos. Geschmackheit in Stokke, Geschmackheit in Teire. Talk the talk, walk the walk. See that overflow in you. The Rebbetzin Morabela. So, I hope you don't think of me as a linker, but when she was in Cleveland and in Minneapolis, she had a nursery school for 3-year-olds, and there's a mixed class. Boys and girls in the same class, 3-year-olds. Hope nobody's nervous. There was a Chassidish Rebbe, Rebbe Blum. He said his kid with the girls, but that's the way it is. Out of town. I know here, separated from the hospital, but Dalton and Minneapolis and in Cleveland and Chicago and Detroit and Los Angeles. And they look at me amazement, like, you can't believe it. Nursery school has boys and girls in the same 3-year-olds. My contract's up in 2 years. You see, if you don't want it, then find another rabbi. Shmuel, you know. Upon him. So what happens is that you have a Shabbos party. What's the Shabbos party? The kid puts on one of my hats, and he like strangles himself with a tie. And the girl puts on a tichel, and she makes believe she's sitting there Shabbos. Then the kid makes kiddush. So most kids, they stand, they sit, they stand and sit. They do the minute of their father. So there's one kid in another nursery school. He gets up to make kiddush, and he says, "Boy, am I tired! Do it to them before they do it for you to you. Daven for the Dow, shishi." That's how his father makes kiddush. He's tired, he's exhausted, he can't deal with the market. Instead of in stolen, Irgin Sheter stolen many years ago. I'm sure Beit Deutsch can find a tape, the CD. It was on tape in those days. And a stolen young man came out to me afterwards and said his wife is also a Ganenet, the nursery school teacher. And she had a different Maisa. But a child got up and started making kiddush, and he closed his eyes and he says, "Mommy, thank you for making such a delicious suda. Kinderlach for setting the table and not fighting. How do you want your kids to make kiddush? If you don't find that inner greatness in you, then they're not going to find it in themselves. Das ist the site for Yiddishkeit. That's Reb Chaim, whatever you're doing in life is the Ratzon of Hashem." You know what the koyach of tefillah is? Tefillah can be mishan of the world. You want to activate your inner greatness. Every Yid is special. Daven. Chazanish, the Shalah, they have a tefillah. If a kid's off the derech, you can daven and take away his bechira chavshis. Noach, it's called Mei Noach because he should have been mispal. What do you mean? It's bechira chavshis to be oivdei, all kinds of taivas. He could have davened to take away the bechira chavshis. Even the Kohen God was taken to task. How a person can kill b'shaykik, take away his bechira chavshis. He wouldn't walk in with faulty equipment. In Eretz Yisrael, there was a strong movement in Knesset many years ago to legalize Achman Litzon abortions. Following Roe and Wade, they want to legalize it. And it was headed by a fellow named Shmuel Tamir. I don't know if the Tamir Chassan Hall is named after the guy, but Shmuel Tamir. So the Gedolim got together and said, "Davgein to Shmuel Tamir. How can we allow Yiddish kinder? Hapalot." And they decided, let's take a Goyin and B'fol Levin. Hagoyin Rebbe Fol Levin was Hagoyin Rebbe Aryeh Levin's son. I met him. It was unbelievable. It was at the Shechina. He told you that he saw the Shechina on you. It was unbelievable. Why him? Because of Aryeh Levin, the tzaddik of Yerushalayim, tzaddik in his time, was Mekarev the Asirei Tzion. All of those people imprisoned by the British, sentenced to death sometimes. Haganah, Palmach, Stirring Gang, Lechi, Irgun, not Irgun Shirei Torah, different Irgun. So, whatever, they got some Apecha, and they were in prison, hundreds of them, in Akko, in Yerushalayim, in Russian compounds. And Rabbi Levin used to be Mekarev them and Mechazik them and give them messages and remember 100 messages on Shabbos and be Mechazik them in Yiddishkeit. He was called the Rav of the Asirei Tzion. And Shmuel Tamir was of the Asirei Tzion. So he said, let's bring Rebbe Foyle and a Kenzach Gut Albertin with the Shmuel Tamir. Shmuel Tamir said, Rebbe Foyle said, I'm maskim. But every Rav who's going has to spend 3 days davening like he never davened before. Muz davening, fat slocha. Of course they were maskim. So Aryeh Levin's son, Rebbe Foyle, comes to Shmuel Tamir. Says to him, when I was a little boy, I remember vividly, a couple came to my parents. And they said, the matzav kalkali, financially, is impossible. We can't put food on the table. And the lady said, we have some kids, and she's pregnant, and they want to head her. V'hapala. They're going to go crazy. They can't put food on the table. So Aryeh Levin, Ad Halois HaShochar, spent the whole night fighting with the Malach HaMoves to save this kid's life. And they were maskim. And 9 months later, they had a baby boy. And Aryeh Levin was the Sandik. V'koreh Shmoi b'Yisroel, Shmuel Tamir. This was you. If you had hapalot, you wouldn't be here today. Shmuel Tamir runs out of the room. No cell phones in those days. He calls his mother. She bursts into tears. What should I tell you? We had no money. And the Rav convinced us. And Baruch Hashem, you're the result. Shmuel Tamir came back, and he said, I promise you, as long as I'm a member of Knesset, and he became a justice, Supreme Court justice, they will never pass the abortion law. As long as Shmuel Tamir was there, it didn't happen. Gewaldig, nicht shaykh, mit der Koisam of Freizach. The Rebbe said, before, why did you drive us crazy? That's Gahat Shmuel Tamir and Keshina. That's why I drove you crazy. My Rebbetzin said, oh, you suffer. What does Esther say? Tzumu alai. Who does she invite, says the Goyin? Hitler. Because they said, Achoisei shonu b'beis HaMelech. So to make sure there wasn't any Havman to rely on Haman, on Esther, they all said she's a turncoat. Now we have to get on to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rebbetzin said, that was with Shmuel Tamir. Rebbe Foyle was saying, you think Mabnem and Keshana? He says, Rebbe Foyle, absolutely not. Now you got to daven. There used to be a lady in Detroit, her name was Rebbetzin Prero. And when things started heating up, she would tell his kids, Kinderlach, wir kennen schon nicht Semech sein auf Nisim, it's the Zeit zu sagen Tillim. Can't rely on Nisim anymore, we got to say Tillim. The Koyach Tefillah is not Shaykh. Unleashed. It could bring Mashiach today. But we have to believe it in ourselves. That's the Gemara Rosh Hashanah. Yud Chesam and Aleph. 2 were sentenced to the Gardum to be hung by the king. 2 were sentenced to death by illness. They both davened. 1 was released and 1 was killed. 1 got healed and 1 died. But the Gemara, they both davened. Dr. Gemara, he davened a complete tefillah, and he davened an incomplete tefillah. The terrorist is worse than the kasha. He's about to die from an illness, and he fudged Rafa'inu. So Rashi, this one was Naskaven, This one is not a skav. See, he's about to get hung. No, I'm not going to have kavanah. Sagt der Görer Belly Lapianzat so. The skaven means he believed it would work. So the fellow who was crying copious tears, those were tears of frustration, angst. He gave up. But this one davened and he had kavanah. He knew that it would work. Tefillah works if we realize that it's going to work. And each of us has the opportunity to do that. Ramichu Be'avais Mandel was Nitshayach. Goyen Adel. He tried saving Klal Yisroel. After the war, he traveled to far-flung locations. He came to Morocco for Sukkot. He says to somebody, I got to get hold of a lulav and esrog. Oh, Kila, don't worry about it, Rabbi. I take care of everybody. He comes to shul the morning of Sukkot. He sees a festival of esrogim. Like 300 esrogim in the barrel. I say, esrog. You all know what we're supposed to do. Pick out 50 lulav and passel 49 lulav. That's lulav and esrog. He was very upset. Kitzur, he was soon mollified. He was mollified because the Chazan, Mamish was like a nightingale. The Chazan it was gorgeous. So even though he couldn't pick out his own little Vanesrig, the Chazan made up for it. The next day, he comes back to shul, gets his esrog out of the barrel, and he hears a fellow davening for the Yomid. It's croaking. Terrible voice. He asks somebody, what happened to the Chazan? Etmol tafsu oto b'sheker. Yesterday they caught him in a lie. If you lie, you can't daven for the Yomid. So he said to himself, who's bigger hid the mitzvah? Me that looks for an esrig? Or the kila miracle that if you lie, you can't daven for the Yomid? I'll end with one story. I have a friend of mine, a Chassidish Rebbe. Yeah, Litvishes have Chassidish Rebbes as friends also. Told me this Maisa from his sister, a Rebbetzin, one of the biggest Rebbeim in Bnei Brak. A younger man walks over to a 5th grade Rebbe and he tells him, Rebbe, because of you, I finished Shas twice with Bechinis, Gemara Rashi, Tosfos, Rosh and Ran, and he never got less than 95. Normally hundreds. It's all because of you. Doesn't remember the kid. Then he continues, Rebbe, we were in 5th grade. A very schwache class. So the Gaonim on the board decided, they passed a law that any kid who fails a test in the 5th grade, the Rebbe has to mark it and circle it with a red crayon or marker, and inside it should say the word nichshal in big red letters. Nichshal means failed, which means he's a failure. And Rebbe, he remembers, I could never pass a test. 40, 45, 60, I never got a 65. And dutifully, every single time you'd grade the paper. And you'd write 49. And you'd take your red marker and you'd circle it and you'd write Nichshal. Then you'd take a ballpoint pen. And inside the circle you would add Rak HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ani V'Hayeled Yodim Kama Kochot Hu Ishkia B'Limudim HaShavua. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I and your child know how hard he tried. And every week, my parents would get the paper. And every week, they'd see the test. And every week, they'd have to sign it. And every week, it said Nichshal. And every week, they saw how inside the Rebbe had written, Rak ani, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ani ve'ayeled, yodim kama kochot hu ishkia b'limudim. And every week, they did the same thing. They hugged me, and they kissed me, and they told me how proud they were. Rebbe, I finished Shas twice. I took Bechinis on all of Shas, Gemara Shittesis, Rosh Hashanah, Never less than a 95, 100. So how do you want to raise your kid? How do we raise our Talmidim? How do we raise our Balabatim? How do we raise Klal Yisrael? Nichshol. The failures. Or do we look at Shkida, achievement, and how hard they try, and how incredible they are? That's the future of Klal Yisrael. That's the inner greatness that every Yid has, and you have to find in yourself. That we should be Zeichataka, to reveal the majesty of being B'nai and B'nais Menachem, to influence hundreds of thousands in the years to come, and to merit in that schus, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu Me'er V'Yameinu. Amen.
Shem Irgun Shir Torah, Moses Boston. I'd like to give a big yashikayach to Rav Lieff for the very inspiring drasha. I'd like to give a big yashikayach, the sponsor of tonight's shir, Bais Shem, the Nishmas Isha Shalom Esnomi, Asar Gedalia Aryeh, Leah Sholem, and Aisha Chava Bashavar and Yosef, Leah Sholem. Also tonight's shir was learned the Nishmas, my grandmother Aisha Esther, Asar Pinchas, Leah Sholem Bais. Here tonight, Chof of Bais have a help Irgun Shir Torah with our Batas Torah the Rabbim with the upcoming annual dinner August 18th in Yisroel Avenue K. We're putting an ad in the journal to honor the Rabbanim whose shiurim we've enjoyed and how the chelik and our Batas Torah of Irgun Shir Torah throughout the world throughout the year. Call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com for this great schus. Ashikach to everyone for coming. Chananya ben Akashem, Rotzakadosh Baruch Hu Lezakis, Es Yisroel Afikir Hibelim Torah Mitzvah, Shenemar Lo Noi Chofetz, Leman Tzidka, Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh.